and perhaps to some extent even question our doctor about the necessity of these things.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk about how Minnesota lawmakers, most of them, I believe the majority of them, are keeping their salaries during this shutdown. And the two of you have decided, I guess, what are your perspectives on the salary, whether lawmakers should keep the salary or not during the shutdown?
Well, it's just been a personal choice. The speaker and I don't know if the judges were involved with that, said that legislators were considered essential employees. I've told my personal story. My family depended on a federal income at one point, and when the federal government shut down, I knew what it was like. It impacted our family. We didn't get a paycheck one month, and yet I knew my congressman was getting his, and it angered me beyond belief to think they're collecting a nice fat paycheck, and I'm sitting home unable to pay my house payment and my utility bills, and now here I am in that position, and I couldn't in any good conscience take a paycheck based on how I felt personally. And so for me, that I got to make that choice, and I think all the legislators were informed. You have a choice, and people had to look at their own personal circumstances and I think just their philosophical belief about whether they needed it. And some of us did, and more of us did, some of us didn't.
Okay, and Senator, I understand you also are not receiving a paycheck right now either?
Yeah, and for a lot of the reasons I think offered here by Representative Norton, it's just, I recognize I'm part of a group of 201 legislators that have not quite got their job done, and some people would even say we've failed, and I can accept some of that. It's hard, success or failure is probably not going to depend on one person, but I'm part of a process that failed, and as long as that's the case, it would be totally inappropriate, at least for me, in my heart of hearts, to take that paycheck until we get this thing solved, and we've got 22,000 people out there right now that aren't getting paychecks, that are good people, hard-working people that want to be working, can't be working because of the situation that we're in right now, and where I take a paycheck and go around and look them in the eye, I frankly couldn't do it. So I just wanted to put myself on an even level.
Last weekend, it needs to be, I think, understood that not all the legislators are involved in these discussion and negotiation talks between the governor and the Republican leadership. So not everybody's involved, but last weekend I was told, there were media reports that there was a long weekend off taken by leadership of, I guess, for everybody involved, the governor, and then the majority party's leadership over the 4th of July weekend. And I have to ask, do you guys know, was that something where they said, okay, we'll wait until Tuesday to have discussions?
I don't know. I can't tell you firsthand. I know no meetings were scheduled. I was not asked to come. I stood ready, as I'm sure Dave did. We were here ready, waiting for a call, but we weren't part of deciding when the next meeting was scheduled.
Okay.
To my knowledge, none, Matt.
I think, having been there, and Representative Norton was as well, the Thursday night, the last night that of the session, if you will, or at least not of the session, but prior to close down, a lot of emotions go through you during that period of time. Yeah. Nobody wants this to happen. Yeah. Midnight strikes, and it does happen. I think there just kind of needed to be a little bit of, I don't want to call it cooling down. I don't think anything was necessarily mad, but I think everybody kind of needed to take a deep breath and just kind of clear their brain a little bit. And so I think there probably was some value to the weekend in terms of just re-energizing, rethinking about positions and things like that there. So I know Senator Koch was in on Friday. Nothing happened, but we're all available. We all have cell phones, and we're all frankly ready to go. And if we get a call right now, show's over, we're going.
Okay. Okay. Well, it seems like the third-party group came in, and they've already come out with some. We talked about the tax increases that they wanted, and it sounded like the Republican leadership's kind of holding firm and saying we don't want any tax increases. It almost seems like Dayton's going to run out of options here, and that he's going to need to say, okay, I mean, because somebody has to at some point. And I mean, do you guys, based on that third-party group that came in and said, and they gave some recommendations, and then the leadership said, no, we don't like the tax increases, do you think that right now that it's more likely that the governor then will say, okay, and the 34 point, I don't know the number, but that he'll accept the lower number?
Absolutely not. I think what the governor might give up on is what kind of revenue it is. And in fact, he has. He offered two options on Monday, and one of them did not contain the income tax increase. So he's already kind of said, I hear you. I hear that, the very conservative, Tea Party, if you will, folks aren't ever going to agree to this. So I'll offer something else. So he put two options, the one he preferred, and another one that was, he said, I prefer option one, but I'll take option two if you do it. And that one was turned down as well. And, until we get to the point where some revenue is going to be taken back to some folks to find those 7 or 10 or 20 folks that will agree to the revenue. I don't see Governor Dayton giving up everything and going to 34, particularly after this group and the economists have come out and said it needs to be both. It needs to be revenue and it needs to be cuts.
Okay.
And he's already proposed over $2 billion of cuts. So he's looking for that little bit of revenue. And again, as Dave and I have talked about, I think there are some options that might be possible. We just need to get to that number that will agree to it.
Do you think we're any closer right now, given has the third party group made any difference in terms of making us closer towards, I mean, is that impossible to quantify, but
we certainly don't discount their work, but was it all helpful? I think generally speaking not. We're able to kind of do this for ourselves. I think for the most part, we can. We drive down the highway. I'll tell you, we think about every little notch in the gun on these kind of things, and what's possible and what's not, and how we might strategize. Certainly appreciate the third party's work, but I don't think it was generally helpful. I think their recommendation was 4% across the board. At all levels. I think even they knew the governor wouldn't accept that, at least in terms of putting a 4% tax on the lower incomes. So,
what did come out of it was a tobacco tax suggested.
Well, the tobacco tax was out of it, yeah.
Yeah, that might be.
Well, how do you guys feel about that? I mean, smokers have been getting hit for years, and it's a very popular tax because it's going to lower healthcare costs and make people healthier at the same time as it raises revenue. But do you think that is a cigarette tax a viable answer for revenue generation, do you think?
It's possible. I think, when we're in situations like this, we tend to tax our sins. And but for me, first and foremost, let's talk about a bill that I'm carrying, and it's a Racino bill. And I know Senator Norton is not maybe necessarily fond of it, but it's a good bill. It promotes an industry in Minnesota. Plus, it creates some money. And 78% approval ratings on it. I think generally speaking, most people, Republicans and Democrats, think that one's okay.
And I'll just say that the flip side to that is, I do think there are some people who think it's fine, is it will break a compact we have with the Native Americans and probably end us up in court. In addition to the fact the money isn't readily available, it will take a year or two for it to come in. And so I think that's a disadvantage as well. And we're pushing, I've heard, we're pushing the envelope as to when that effectiveness of the Racino, when that is a viable option, because the longer this state shutdown occurs, the tougher it is on that, the horse racing, the Canterbury Parks, to be able to continue to maintain those horses that are willing to stay here. They'll leave. And so I think, if the Racino, does have the support in the legislature to pass, it better happen quickly, or I think that becomes less viable.
Do you guys have an idea of a range in terms of? I think that I know what a lot of people thought was, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, is that okay, we're going to have a shutdown, but it's going to be short. But then, reports came out that, it could be a lot longer now. Do you guys have, if you just were kind of going by your gut instinct and your experience with the legislature and the moods that you guys have been hearing, if you gave a range, how long do you think this thing could last?
I can't predict. And frankly, if you go back to 2005, I don't think anybody could predict, but there was a day at about this point in time, Governor Plenty came in and said to our caucus, look, I know you don't like this, but in the best interest of Minnesota, this is what we have to do. And at that point, he advocated for what he called this health impact fee, the cigarette tax. So it can happen rather quickly, and that's why we're all on call. So at least for me, I can't predict. This could go on for a very, very long time, or it could, for instance, be over tomorrow.
Doesn't it have to end before the school year starts?
I believe the schools are somewhat funded, at least with their per pupil funding. You get into the rest of the formulas, I don't think that they're funded. So I think the schools could start. They might struggle a little bit. Maybe Representative Norton knows more.
I think the special master just approved special ed funding, so the special ed and general fund formulas will come through, but there's other money that the school districts will need. I think they could limp along. So I would anticipate them starting in September. I know particularly charter schools are negatively impacted by this because they don't have the same advantages as a regular school district does with regard to finances. So the charter schools in particular are struggling. And I would just say this needs to get done soon. We have 22,000 employees, former employees at this point, who need a paycheck, who have to pay their bills, whose families are being impacted, and we simply can't do this. So sooner rather than later.
And I just want to ask if is there anything that you wanted to add that I haven't asked you about that you think is important at this point in the shutdown situation, or that you think people should know, or anything?
Well, the only thing I guess I would add is I've had some concern, and maybe Dave can clarify this, that the leadership, Senator Koch and Speaker Zellers, have said they will not take any tax increase back to their caucuses for a vote, for internal. They won't take that option back. And I'm a little concerned with that because, as Dave and I have talked, there are some things we could agree to. It may not be income tax. It may be some other things. I'm hoping that isn't the case. I'm hoping that all options will be taken back, because at some point there might be 7 or 8 or 9 people who will break and say, this is long enough. You know, as Governor Plenty did a few years ago, it's time to get off the dime and make that change. And so if the leadership continues with that philosophy of we will not take anything back that contains a tax, I'm concerned about that. So that is the one question I have, I guess, and I'd love an answer. Dave may not know.
Well, I've not heard that. You know, we had a caucus yesterday. There was, you know, not certainly any conversation along those lines, and we all have, you know, we have diversity in our caucus as well. We have people that are just absolutely rock solid, and we have people that could look at certain things and not other things. And but with respect to Senator Koch, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think she's open to you know, certainly conversations, and of course, you know, it's a sharing thing. Sometimes leaders have to do what leaders may not personally want to do. The other thing, though, I would say is that you know, my urging is that Senator Dayton, now Governor Dayton, would call us back in session at least for a lights on bill. I don't personally think, you know, this idea of we're going to put a lot of pressure on the legislature because we've got 22,000 people laid off, and they're going to put pressure on, and thus we're going to get this deal done. I don't think that's working very well from the standpoint of its overall effectiveness. I think it would be far better, and I don't think we feel any more obligated to get a budget done by virtue of the fact that these people are not working.
Don't you get more political pressure applied, though?
So I don't. You know, we certainly get pressure. There's no question about that. But I think, you know, we're all legislators. We know what our job is. You know, to go up and get this budget solved. I think we can get this budget solved just as easy if people were working, as opposed to if they're not working. I think that's just us. I think we feel an obligation to do our work, and I don't think we should have to, if you will, hurt all of these people to press us to get our job done, a job that we already know we should be doing.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming on, and thank you for joining us for Hey, Let's Talk on Fridays. We'll see you next week, and have a good day.